Hi everyone and welcome to English in the Afternoon. This is the second video on common sentence structure mistakes. In the first video we covered sentence fragments, and here we talk about run-on sentences. What is a run-on sentence? Well, if a sentence fragment is a sentence that is missing some parts which prevent it from being a complete sentence, which we already discussed in the previous videos, a run-on sentence is almost the opposite. A run-on sentence is a sentence that keeps on going without paying much attention to periods or commas or any other kind of grammatical rules. It is basically a sentence that should have stopped being a sentence a long time ago. The following are all examples of run-on sentences. All the boys in my school have good grades. They study together almost every night. Gloria saw the horror movie alone twice. Nobody wanted to go with her. Neymar, Messi, and Suarez were the greatest team ever. They couldn't stay together. How come you didn't see me? I was right next to the ticket booth. Can you see what's wrong with all these sentences? Let's take a closer look at exactly why they are run-on sentences. There are basically two ways a sentence can be a run-on sentence. We'll cover both ways first, and then we'll go over how to fix the problem. The first way is if we don't have the necessary punctuation in the sentence. For example, Mandeep has two sisters who live in Italy. One is in Milan and the other is in Napoli. The problem here is that this one sentence is actually made up of two sentences. The first one is Mandeep has two sisters who live in Italy, and the second one is in Milan and the other is in Napoli. But there is no period between them. Another one. I need to look at a map when driving. I always seem to get lost. Same problem. We have two sentences and there's nothing to separate them. The easiest way to fix this problem is to put a period between the two sentences. In other words, to make two sentences out of one. I need to look at a map when driving, period. I always seem to get lost. Remember, a sentence usually has one subject, especially if we're talking about a simple sentence. So as soon as you have a clear subject and make a point about the subject, you can stop the sentence. If you want to say something else about the subject, begin a new sentence. There's nothing wrong with writing short sentences. It's always much better to write a clear short sentence than try to look smart and fail at a long one. Remember, the point of writing is always to explain to the reader what you want to say. If you can say your point in a short, simple sentence, don't write a long, complicated one. But wait, you might think, can't we just put a comma between the two sentences? Can't we just say, I need to look at a map when driving, comma, I always seem to get lost? Well, no. A comma doesn't fix the sentence. It actually creates another type of run-on sentence. It's called a comma splice. This means that two sentences are joined together, and instead of separating them with a period, which is the correct thing to do, we instead use a comma. This type of mistake is common, and we can easily make it without knowing, especially with longer sentences. In the simplest version, this second type of run-on sentence looks like this. The car did not want to start. I had to call my dad for help. So, again, this mistake could be fixed by just putting a period where the comma is. But this type of mistake might become more tricky to see if we write a complex or a compound complex sentence. For example, once Jane understood how to properly kick a ball, she became a much better player. She scored 2 goals in her first game. Here the sentence looks like a compound complex sentence. We could assume that we have the complex part at the beginning with the dependent clause followed by the main clause, and then we have the compound part, which is another main or independent clause. The problem is that the second part is not a compound part at all, but actually another sentence that has just been attached to an otherwise normal complex sentence. The fastest way to fix this is to write, once Jane understood how to properly kick a ball, she became a much better player. Period. She scored 2 goals in her first game. Let's look at another one real quick. My store went out of business because I had no customers. I had no customers because I didn't know how to advertise my product. Here we have two complex sentences next to each other. Here is the first one, and here is the second one. There is nothing wrong with these two. The problem is that they are separated by just a comma and not a period. Again, these are very common mistakes. We cannot notice them when speaking, of course, but in writing, they are very easy to make. Now, let's look at how to fix a run-on sentence. The first way is what we just discussed in the previous slide. Put a period between the two independent clauses. For instance, Albert Einstein was a great genius. He explained how the universe works. All we need here is a period between the two sentences. Albert Einstein was a great genius, period. He explained how the universe works, period. The second way is something very similar to a period. It's called a semicolon. This guy. A semicolon is somewhere between a period and a comma. We use it when two sentences are related to each other, like in our case here, yet they are two separate sentences. So we can write, Albert Einstein was a great genius, semicolon, he explained how the universe works. The thing to remember about semicolons is that when we use them, we need to make sure that there is an independent clause on both sides. Both this side and this side of the semicolon need to be full sentences. Also, after the semicolon, we do not start a sentence with a capital letter, but instead we keep it small. The third way is to turn the sentence into a compound sentence. For instance, Albert Einstein was a great genius, comma, for he explained how the universe works. In this case, we use the fanboys for, but of course, depending on the sentence, you might need to use a different fanboys. The fourth way to fix the sentence is to turn it into a complex sentence. For example, Albert Einstein was a great genius because he explained how the universe works. Or if we switch the main clause and the dependent clause, we can say, because Albert Einstein explained how the universe works, he was a great genius. Maybe this cannot be done with all run-on sentences, but you will find that most of them you can turn into a complex sentence. There is one more way with transitions, but we'll cover that in another video. Let's try to fix one more before we do practice. Take, for example, this sentence. Jonathan graduated from the best school in Portland, but he could not get into Harvard. This is a run-on sentence. More specifically, it's a comma splice, dividing two sentences with just a comma. So let's go through all the ways we can fix this. Number one, we can separate the two sentences by a period. Jonathan graduated from the best school in Portland, period, he could not get into Harvard. Number two, we can use a semicolon to separate the two sentences. Jonathan graduated from the best school in Portland, semicolon, he could not get into Harvard. Remember, this letter stays small. Number three, we can turn two sentences into a compound sentence. Jonathan graduated from the best school in Portland, but he could not get into Harvard. And number four, we can turn it into a complex sentence. Even though Jonathan graduated from the best school in Portland, he could not get into Harvard. Or if we want to switch the dependent clause and the main clause, we can say Jonathan could not get into Harvard even though he graduated from the best school in Portland. All right, let's do a little practice. Here we have three run-on sentences. Fix each sentence in any two ways you want. I'll give you a minute to complete the exercise. Okay, the first one. We can say, we won the lottery last month, period. We bought a new house and 3 cars. Or, we won the lottery last month, semicolon, we bought a new house and 3 cars. We can make a compound sentence. We won the lottery last month, comma, so we bought a new house and 3 cars. And we can make a complex sentence. In this case, we are using the subordinating conjunction since. Since we won the lottery last month, we bought a new house and 3 cars. Or, we bought a new house and 3 cars since we won the lottery last month. Number 2. Jen ate the food I left in the fridge, period. I wasn't upset. Or, Jen ate the food I left in the fridge, semicolon. I wasn't upset. Or as a compound sentence, Jen ate the food I left in the fridge, but I wasn't upset. And as a complex sentence, although Jen ate the food I left in the fridge, I wasn't upset. Or if we want to switch the dependent clause and the main clause, we can say, I wasn't upset even though Jen ate the food I left in the fridge. Small issue here, by the way. Although and even though are actually the same thing. Sometimes we use one and sometimes we use the other one. However, in most cases, if we use a subordinating conjunction in the middle of a sentence, we tend to say even though. In the middle of a sentence, you will more likely see even though than although. And number 3. Jack wanted to buy a new computer, period. His wife wanted to buy an iPhone. Or Jack wanted to buy a new computer, semicolon. His wife wanted to buy an iPhone. When it comes to the compound sentence, there are 2 fanboys we can use. It depends on what we want to say. If we want to explain that Jack and his wife each wanted something, then we use and, as in, Jack wanted to buy a new computer and his wife wanted to buy an iPhone. However, if we want to explain that Jack and his wife could only buy one thing, then we would need to use but, as in, Jack wanted to buy a new computer, but his wife wanted to buy an iPhone. As a complex sentence, if we assume that they each want something, we can say, while Jack wanted to buy a new computer, his wife wanted to buy an iPhone. And if we want to show that only one of them could have something, we can say, since Jack wanted to buy a new computer, his wife wanted to buy an iPhone. These 2 subordinating conjunctions perhaps do not provide the exact meaning we are looking for, but they cover the general idea. And that too is a lesson we covered earlier. If the sentence does not correctly convey what you mean, don't be afraid to change it. Not all sentences work best in the complex form or the compound complex form. Sometimes all you need is a simple sentence. All right, great work, everyone. I hope you're now able to identify and fix sentence fragments and run-on sentences when you see them in your writing.